Welcome to another episode of Check Your Shelf. I'm Paul,
I'm Steve.
and this week we're going to do the Booktube Newbie Tag video. I've been watching a lot of these, and they're a lot of fun. You get to learn stuff really quick about the booktubers that you like to follow. They say if you're a newer booktuber, this is a good one to do. So I, for more lack of a better word, curated 7 questions, because there's all kinds of standard questions people like to ask on their videos. I curated 7 questions for your entertainment. Before we get to those questions, though, if you like our channel, now's the chance to get in, man. Get down there, subscribe, like, hit that bell notification button, leave us a comment. That having been said, let's get to the 7 questions. So, Steve, why do you love reading?
Reading it sends me somewhere else. And, meditation is fine and everything, but it's nice to let somebody else do the meditating for you.
Yeah.
It works my brain in ways that, just there's no other way to get my brain working that way. I'm able to experience other realms, other locations, other real ones sometimes when I read more realistic fiction, imaginary realms. If it's sci-fi, it gives me all sorts of ideas for practical application. And so, it just sends me somewhere else.
That's real, though, how you can read something completely out there, like Lord of the Rings or something, and it has practical applications in the real world for you sometimes,
Yeah.
So it doesn't always have to be a textbook or a manual. For me it's escapism. It's escapism, and kind of like what you said, it's mind expansion on all fronts. I go, regardless of what I'm reading, I like to just I sink into wherever. If the writing's good, I'll sink into wherever that is. And if I have difficulty with the writing style, I try to figure out that writing style so that I can slump in there. The greatest example for me was Lovecraft. Couldn't stand the guy, couldn't stand reading his stuff, and then one day it just clicked when I figured out what it was. Also, escapism, because we grew up in Springfield Township, and Google Earth is free, kids. Look it up and you'll understand.
You'll be like, there's nothing there. Exactly.
What book and or series got you into reading?
This one has sort of a multi-part answer, because the earliest books I can remember reading, not having read to me, because I can remember some of the early ones that my mom read to us. But the ones I would always go seek out, interestingly enough, were in the Springfield Township Elementary School library, curated and overseen by Mrs. Schultz. And I'd go in there and I'd look for the those short books on sports figures, like race car drivers, baseball players, because in my house, we watched a lot of sports, at least baseball, mostly baseball. Not as much football and stuff, but we watched a lot of baseball. And the Indianapolis 500 was a big deal every year. We'd watch that. So I knew the names. And so when I was in the library, I'd be like, oh, this Al Unser, let me learn about Al Unser. Oh, Johnny Bench, let me learn about. And I was able to read these things and get, learn something. It sent me to their childhood and their how they came up, and it fed my dreams of being a professional baseball player, professional, auto racer or whatever. So that's realizing that you could get a book and learn stuff and actually imagine yourself, and it fed those dreams. And I mean, literally, I would dream I was a professional baseball player and that kind of thing,
Yeah.
both daydreaming and night dreaming. The series The first series that I started seeking out every book to, and this maybe will tell people more about me than I was actually wanting to, is Ramona the Brave by
Oh
Beverly
man.
Cleary. I loved, and that was the first time I think, like the other books were like heroes, right? Like that
Mm-hmm.
I aspired to be.
Mm-hmm.
Ramona was me. She was living my childhood, right? I
Yeah,
could
yeah.
totally relate to her. Um, and I just would see myself in her, and the way she thought, and the trouble she'd get herself into, and the insecurities and the misgivings, and the way adults would misunderstand her, and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. I was like, I could totally relate. So
Yeah.
Ramona the
Yeah.
Brave.
Yeah, in spite of having no budget, the elementary school library was pretty impressive. The
Yeah.
the picture books for kids, the storybooks for kids alone was probably bigger than what we had at the Michigan City Public Library, because a lot of them were all just donations from other libraries and other book owners and stuff like that. So we ended up with we our encyclopedias didn't know how Vietnam ended, but we had all the great Curious George. We had like
Oh
probably
yeah.
first or second edition Curious George stuff. So that was
Were we like the poor school that the rich people like donated to? Is
that's
that
why we had such good books.
nice? Okay, I never
Yeah,
realized that. We were the
yeah,
poor school everybody felt sorry for, those poor rural farm kids.
that's right.
Let's get them some books. Maybe they can get out of that place. We're like, well, thank you.
Yeah, right. Hang on a second. I want to see if I can find it.
Curious George.
Let's see how many times you checked out Curious George. Oh,
Oh,
the tag is missing, but
oh, dang it.
I do have some books down here that my name is in and John Hutchinson's name is in. But when they hold on, this is professional right here. When they updated everything, they had a huge book sale, and I just went through and just grabbed all these great picture books with all this great, art that was, as an artist looking back, it was highly influential on me.
By the way,
Hmm,
while we're on the topic of that library, it's interesting because small library, probably the size of a classroom, right?
it
Maybe.
was an old classroom.
All right. Um, in the middle of the country,
Hmm.
literally like literal cornfields. Like we're not like, oh, cornfields. No, there was
Yep. Yep.
cornfields right there that you could run into during recess.
Hmm.
Um, but this would be gratifying to any adult who was trying to do something, right?
Hmm.
The card catalog, the fact that you had the checkout little card things, the mechanism of it to a little kid, at least to this little kid,
Hmm.
all of that was fun to me. Like I
Yeah.
enjoyed the mechanism of looking through the card catalog, and I felt so proud when I would have to write my name or somebody would write my
Hmm.
name in the little card thing, right? And you could go back and you'd be like, "Oh, I checked this out, last
Hmm.
year about this time or whatever." Which fed, like when we went to the public library in Michigan City, I already felt comfortable there, even though I'd never been there. I was like, oh, card catalog.
Yeah.
I know how that
Yeah.
works. I know how checking things out works. And that just carries you over, even though it seems like it's the book that's important, not the little mechanism of how you go about getting
Yeah.
it. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, for me, that really fed into my feeling like I was important,
Yeah.
because I could go
Yeah.
borrow these things. They
Yeah.
trust me with this book for a week or whatever.
Well, the thing about that card catalog is like, one, it made you feel like an adult
Yeah.
because it made you feel like you were part of a bigger thing. Like, this is
Yeah.
official business right here. And I looked it up and I found it, and that the looking up and finding process was, you know, great. It was so much fun. It was half the book was finding it.
Yeah.
For me, it was the Hitchhiker's Guide, that book, that series, because I don't really look at like my elementary school reading as like voluntary, because it was mostly for, story time in the school, and it was always school related. Even if it was fun, it was still school related, which is why some of those books I checked out multiple times because I talked about them in multiple grades, you know. Um, and if it also from the Hitchhiker's Guide, the other book series was it was this little book called Little Fuzzy
Hmm.
by H. Beam Piper, and I'm holding it like I have it in my hand because I have my actual book, but it's in that closet over there with a bunch of other boxes full of books, and I didn't have time to dig it out.
So the green screen's not working. Like I can't see the book. Try putting your hand behind
Oh
it
yeah,
or
there you
something.
go. This
Oh,
better?
oh okay. Okay.
Okay,
H.B.
all
and
right, yeah.
Piper. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he wrote these three books about these little sapient creatures that lived on this planet, and there's a whole thing about how what does it mean to be to have a sapient mind, and do these things have rights, and can we just go in there and destroy their planet for minerals when they actually live there? Now, as like a 12, 13-year old when I first read it, none of that really meant anything to me. I was just caught up in the adventure of these little characters, you know. But those two, and he wrote three of them. Those two series is pretty much carried me into like I was heavy into sci-fi from then on for a long time, and then eventually that turned into other stuff. But yeah, okay. So I guess I guess the next question kind of answers itself. When did you start reading?
Hmm. That would be interesting to know, like what the first thing I ever read was. Like if I can figure that out.
Mm,
I was too young. I can't. When do
probably like
kids learn to read? Four, three?
Zip the dog or something. Did you guys read like Zip the dog in like kindergarten?
I don't remember.
Okay.
We, lots of Clifford the big red dog
Mm-hmm.
around my
Mm-hmm.
house. Yeah, I don't remember ever not being able to read. So
Mm-hmm.
I think probably my mom used to read books to us. The main one was this. I didn't realize it until I grew up that it was a religious book. Uh,
Mm.
but but about this like some African dude that was floating down a river and would have died if it weren't for Jesus saving him. And I don't know, as a little kid, it just like was, oh yeah, that makes sense. Jesus saved him. Jesus is
Yeah,
real. Um,
sure. So
but
Santa Claus and Clifford.
yeah, it was probably those it was probably a Clifford book or something. But yeah, probably three or four, I would
Yeah.
have to guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I I was reading comics before I could read. And
Hmm.
I had by the time I was like 7 years old, I'd had two eye surgeries. So I was really far behind in reading. So I spent the majority of my early years, reading picture books and that I knew, which is probably why I checked them out so much. Reading picture books that I knew by heart, and reading comic books because they were words and pictures. And then, of course, I've got a little bit of the dyslexia thing going on, so that kind of helped. But it wasn't. For me. It wasn't really until sixth grade probably was when I started to actually read. Like I would read I blame Hitchhiker's Guide, but like I read like Wrinkle in Time and like Sounder and a couple other
Hmm.
books, for book reports, and really enjoyed them. And it wasn't like it was work.
Yeah.
So in
Boy,
fact,
Wrinkle in Time. Yeah, I remember
yeah,
that one.
yep. And we had found again the Springfield Township Library. We had found both Wrinkle in Time and Sounder on tape at the library.
Ah,
So I just sit there and got my book and got the big gigantic, tape player that we borrowed from the
yeah,
library, and I'd be reading along with it.
yeah.
So yeah, I would say sixth grade probably I became an actual reader.
I remember. Yeah, in terms of like, I am a reader. Yeah, maybe it was like first or second grade,
Mm.
probably. Just because I don't know, the weight of expectations started piling up early in life. So,
Yeah, we had two totally different childhoods. My parents didn't expect anything out of me,
mm.
and as a result, they weren't disappointed. Um, I remember in my last kindergarten report card, which I still have, the teacher wrote, like Paul will be a great reader one day. I'm just like,
one
yeah, it
day.
just took a little longer than the teacher thought it was going to take. On that note, what do you like to read?
Oh, what day is it? It depends on what you mentioned escapism earlier. There
Hmm.
is a whole there it's the reason it depends on the reason I'm reading.
Hmm.
If I'm
Hmm.
looking for escapism, uh fantasy and science fiction is kind of my go-to.
Hmm.
Um I have read there's one series that is not great, but it's great.
Mm.
And I don't like every second of it, but it's read by R.C. Bray, who read The Martian, the one that got turned into a movie.
Hmm.
And he's awesome. Like
Mm.
the way he and so it's an audiobook that I listen to. It's a whole series. There's like 15 or 16 of them,
Mm.
and it's called Expeditionary Force, and it's hard science fiction in terms of there's no magical like and
Yeah.
then somehow they jump. Nobody understands how it works, but they do this thing that like everything gets explained, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
plausible. If not completely scientifically accurate, it at least tries to be, right? So
Hmm.
that's real escapism for me, right? The characters, the ideas and stuff. So it's usually science fiction or fantasy like Lord of the Rings um,
Hmm.
or Hitchhikers or whatever. Now, if I'm wanting to learn something, I
Hmm.
do read my share of business books,
Yeah.
whether it's team dynamics or technology. Um, Most of the business books I like to read tend to be like I'm looking for strategic information. Um, I used to read a lot of tactical stuff, like how to get better at a certain thing. Then
Hmm.
I've realized the internet's better for that. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a just-in-time learner. So if I'm going to read a book about how to get more done in your day, how to organize your day, it's like I'll read the book and then probably not apply a lot of it.
You're right.
But if I sit there and go, man, I need a new to-do list uh, approach.
Hmm.
What are some approaches to making a to-do list? Is way better for me than reading a book. So I'm more into the strategic thinking, like what's the next 5, 10 years going to be like when it comes to
Yeah.
business books.
Yeah.
Then I like to read literature. I mean, it's not escapism necessarily for me, but it really there's a depth of experience when you read, say, a Tolstoy or Solzhenitsyn or Steinbeck. you know,
Hmm.
so as you and I have been talking, I've recently rediscovered Tolstoy, so I've been reading some of that, and I tried to read Dostoevsky because I feel good about myself, at least if I at least try.
I tried.
You got to do audiobook with that stuff.
Yeah, I tried.
So,
I tried back in the '90s, so it's been a couple minutes. Maybe I might be able to grasp it a little better now in my you know,
yeah,
golden years.
it's thick though, man. It is Dostoevsky's like, well, I heard one guy say, get the audiobook by this guy. He reads it better than you. Like you reading it, it's not great. Like the voice in your head as you're reading it is not going to be nearly as good as this guy reading it. You'll
Right,
understand it better because he
right,
knows
right.
where the inflections come and what the
Yeah.
dialogue's about and all this stuff. So,
Hmm. Yeah, and that's one
yeah,
of the best
so
parts about audiobooks, to be honest.
yeah,
A lot of
yeah,
people poo-poo on them, but it's like,
not around
can
here.
you can you read that good?
So I would say it's kind of like when you ask somebody what kind of music they like, and they're like, "Oh, I like everything." Well, that's
Hmm.
kind of me. I mean,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
will try anything. If somebody tells me I really enjoyed this book, if it's a romance novel, I'll be like, "All right, I'll check it out." I'll read anything. I don't care.
Yeah.
As lately though, and this probably has something to do with the years piling on, it's harder to read a physical book just
Mm.
because of the lighting has to be good, and
Yeah.
I have to be not tired. So.
Which at our age is almost never.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know, you wake up tired when you hit
I
our age.
I have to read this book for work because we're doing a workshop in early April, and we all
Hmm.
agreed to read the book before. So it's a business book. First thing in the morning, I spend about a half an hour reading it because if I don't,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to end up having to buy the audiobook. I was like, Jeff Bezos doesn't need my money for this book, so I went to the used bookstore and picked it up. I'm like, this
Mm.
will work.
Speaking of reading books for business, One day we got to get around to this one. Talk
One of
about
the
this little gem here.
one of the best fictionalized project management books of all time.
It's the most interesting dry prose you'll ever read. For me, it's what they call weird fiction, which is basically anything that is supernatural or super normal. Lovecraft falls into that. I'm a big reader of stuff that was written at least 100 years ago.
Mm.
Because it's fun, and I love sword and sorcery, which is different than fantasy, and one day maybe we'll talk about that. But I love watching, like in reverse, watching like a genre evolve.
Mm.
You know, like you find out that the guys that like Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard were really into were guys that were writing stuff like 50 to 100 years earlier. So you go back and you read that and you're like, oh, I see this just doesn't have like naked ladies in it, you know? So weird fiction for me. And it's part of that escapism and it's part of that inspiration that, makes you think outside of, the physical realm, we maybe touched on this a little bit earlier, but where do you read?
Where do I think I read?
Yes.
Where do I read? Uh, it's starting to sound like a pattern, but it depends on what I'm reading.
Hmm. Hmm.
When it's funny because usually I'll read my Kindle when I go to bed uh,
Hmm.
as a way of just winding down.
Hmm.
Usually I'm looking for escapism there. But that's how I found this Tolstoy thing, this Death of Ivan Ilyich. I was like, oh, I'll go ahead and read this. And I read that. So that
Hmm.
wasn't escapism. Audiobooks is while I'm doing something else. Um, and those fall into both categories. And then the physical book pretty much has to be in the morning and that sofa that gets a lot of good natural light.
Yeah. Light is key, man.
Yeah.
For me, for about at least the past year, it's been one of two places. It's been the kitchen table
Mm.
because the lighting in that room is great. I mean, you have two whole walls of large open windows with not a lot of tree coverage. Like at my old place, we had these nice picture windows, but there was this gigantic tree in the way. So
Oh yeah.
never got much light. I was always reading under a lamp.
Mm.
That's like if I'm reading a physical book, but like if I'm doing like an audiobook, it's usually when I'm pretending that I'm just gonna rest my eyes for a minute while I'm laying in bed.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Be
read I do audiobooks through like I swear I hear them in my sleep, you
Nice.
know?
Before all this,
Mhm.
when I was
Hmm.
commuting to work, I got a ton of listening done in the car
Mhm.
between audiobooks and podcasts and stuff. So it was like if you had asked me this 6 years ago, I would have said the car is where I do
Yeah.
my reading.
Yeah, I remember those days.
If you had asked me 15, 20 years ago, everybody, you'd go to somebody's house. You didn't have to ask them what were reading. You just went into their bathroom and looked on the back of the toilet on top of the tank,
Yep.
right? That's whatever is there. That's what they're reading right now. A lot of times, my parents' house, it was always a Reader's Digest.
Oh
Would
yeah.
always be
Yep.
sitting there,
Yep.
which was great because that's about you could get in there and about the time just before your legs fall asleep, you could get a good uh, thing read.
Reader's Digest got replaced by this.
Yeah, yeah.
So why do you think we started this channel?
I can never give a straight answer. I always got to give like multiple. Like I think there's multiple reasons.
Well, good, because
One
that plays
is
that plays into my next question. But go ahead.
okay, good. One is the very simple practical reason is uh, we want to do something every week.
Hmm.
And some weeks it's like, do you got anything? Do you got anything you want to talk about? You got anything you want to talk
Right.
about? It's like, I don't know. But a book channel
Hmm.
is like there's always if we have something else to talk about, we'll talk about it. But if we
Yeah.
don't, it's like well, let's just do a book this
Yeah.
week. So I think
Do a
that's one
book,
reason we
book
started it.
haul,
Yeah.
book just stories, whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it
Because
gives us
like when
that
we're
chance to do something, right?
Yeah, because when we're doing the Don't Panic Radio show, which I'll put a link down below for, like that stuff is thought out. Like we,
Mm.
you know, especially recently, our
It may not
episodes have
look
been a
like
little
it.
more thought. Yeah, that's how good we are.
Yeah,
We
that's
make
right.
it look like we don't know what we're talking about.
Yes, and so that's like our personal, like, just if nobody ever sees it.
Yeah,
Another, if nobody ever sees it, is it keeps me reading and it keeps me interested. Like I went to this used bookstore over the weekend. I might not have gone to that used bookstore. I might not have thought of it if we weren't
hmm
doing this. So it keeps me reading, keeps me looking for the next thing. And then those are our personal reasons. And then do we have something to say that people are interested in hearing? Uh, if we do, it's probably this,
yeah,
the Don't
yeah,
Panic radio show is kind of an acquired taste. You kind of have to know us and know our humor and stuff,
like Scotch.
like Scotch. But for this, I mean, who doesn't want to hear a 10th take on Mountains of Madness? Like there are
Right,
other
right.
more polished ones out there. There are less polished ones out there, but this one you could probably have a college professor take on it, right? But this is
Yeah,
just like two regular dudes, two besties, uh, just rapping about a book, right?
yeah,
So I think that's kind of interesting, even if you don't know us. You'll be like, well,
yeah.
who are these two middle-aged dudes talking about Hitchhiker's Guide?
That's right. Yeah. That's well, you pretty much took the answer out of my mouth, so I'll just shorten it down to it's a chance to sit around and talk about books with my best friend.
Yeah.
I can talk about books all day when and reading on the Doom my Doom Wizard channel, which is my RPG channel. I did a couple of videos recently where I talked about books that I'd read, and because I'd been watching a lot of BookTube. And I got done and I sat down after like the second or third one that I did, and I went, you know what? This is what I need to do. This type of format, this type of channel is what I need to do. I'm still doing all the other stuff, but it comes so much easier to, to talking about books and stories and, even comic books and stuff like that. So, yeah, and we have plenty to talk about. So, what kind of fun or unique things do you think we can bring to BookTube?
That's one of the ones they told you to ask, isn't it?
It's the only one that I didn't like the wordage for, but I left it in there unironically. I think I understand how that works.
I think what the regular guy brought to movie reviews will bring to books.
Yes. Yes, like when he would for those of you that don't know, a regular guy was I don't know if he still does it or not, but he was a movie reviewer on WXRT out of Chicago. And back in the 80s and early 90s, at least when I was heavy into that channel, um his like movie reviews, he would like talk about, yeah, I went to go see I don't know, like whatever Stephen King movie was out, Total Recall. But then he'll spend almost the entire video or bit talking about his date with his best friend's sister,
Yeah.
and the restaurant they went to. And it was like he was so good at it. So yeah, definitely.
I remember, just to give people a little more color on that guy.
Mm,
The one I remember a lot from back in the day, but a more recent one was when it was probably 20 years ago. Jesus.
more recent in
When
recent
when the when the
modern
Matrix
era.
when the Matrix came out, where
Yeah.
Agent Smith like multiplied into like 1,000 Agent Smiths or whatever. You
hmm
remember, whichever
hmm
one that was, the second one or the third one or whatever. And it was after Lord of the Rings. So Hugo Weaving, of course,
The great
played
Hugo
the
Weaving.
great Hugo Weaving, who played Elrond in Lord of the Rings and played Agent Smith in The Matrix.
hmm
The regular guy's just going, he's talking about the movie. And he's like, yeah, just, so then, Neo goes into and it's raining, and then Elrond shows up and he's fighting Elrond. Next thing you know, there's like 10 Elronds, and then there's like 100. There's like, he's fighting like 1,000 Elronds, next thing you know.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
couldn't stop laughing because I'd never heard anybody do that before.
Yeah.
And I picked it up. You may have noticed. I do that all the time now
Oh
because
yeah,
I just thought that was so funny
yeah,
to call somebody. Well, everybody knows the joke, but
yeah,
I do it now all the time.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
sometimes
Regular
on
guy.
purpose, sometimes
Yeah.
because I can't think of the actor's name. But anyway, I think we bring that. Like we're not the college professor. We're not the. There's a lot out there. Like if you're like, just tell me about the Mountains of Madness, and
Mm-hmm.
somebody will give you a summary of the Mountains of Madness. That's not us, right? That's
Right.
we're the regular guy take on Mountains of
Yeah.
Madness. You're gonna get stories from our childhood. We'll talk about the book in a funny way, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Above all else, I just want to entertain people. You
Yeah.
know, I like having an audience. I like making people laugh. Some say that's a trauma response. But if it is, you're welcome.
The other thing we could throw out there is if you've made it this far in the video, first of all, thank you. Second, if you have a favorite book or not even a favorite, but a book you'd like to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
it's extremely easy these days to have a third person, a fourth person. All you need is a computer
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and the internet, right? You don't
Yeah.
even need fancy microphone, headphones. You don't need any of that. The software we use, um, you just need,
Yeah.
you can use your laptop speaker and your laptop
Yep.
microphone. So
Yep. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Next week, we've been alluding to it. Uh, we're going to talk about at the H.P. Lovecraft's at the Mountain of Madness. So check that one out when it comes out. We're going to try to keep these going once a week. I'm Paul.
I'm Steve.
And the next time you're looking for something to read,
Check your shelf.